All right, guys and girls, it's another episode of the Independent Dealer Podcast. Today we have one of my best friends, Eric Freeman from Freeman Motor Company out in Oregon. Jeff, what we got today?
Eric is he's gonna blow your mind today. Be sure you're sitting down, you're focused, you've got your pen and your paper in here. He's gonna talk to us about scaling 101, when to scale, when to even look out at a second location. Why would you need a second location? He gives us insight into that. He talks about how training is a crucial prerequisite to even thinking about a second or third location. And then if you are ready to go, what you need to be prepared for. Some of the pitfalls, some of the calculations and projections that you need to have. And then you just really got to ask yourself, am I ready? Am I ready to take on this project? I think a lot of dealers look at that. They all think that it's fun to have their name on another sign or a second location or a third location. It's very tempting, but Eric's going to lay it out for us. Right, Eric?
You bet.
Well, guys and girls, you better get ready because this is just a lot of stuff. Write it down, listen to it twice.
Welcome to the Independent Dealer Podcast, the podcast for auto dealers to learn and grow together. Here are your hosts, Luke Godwin and Jeff Watson.
Yeah, Eric, so tell us a little bit about scaling. I think a lot of our dealers, they're asking themselves, when do I open a second location? Do I open a second location? Is it smart? Is it not? Tell us a little bit about your experience going from, starting to, I think you're at 3 stores now, correct?
Yeah, we have 3 stores. We have 2 in Portland, 1 on the west side, 1 on the east side, and then we have 1 in Salem, which is an hour south. So I think the first question that I would think about at this point in time is, as an owner, does my current store need me on a daily basis? So in other words, am I a cog in the wheel, or am I merely just a spoke doing some part of what my store requires each day? And so, in further investigation, what we find is a lot of owners are working in their business and not necessarily on their business. Mm-hmm. And if that is the fact, you are not ready to open a second store.
That's huge.
So Eric, that is so interesting. So right now I know that I don't need to open a second store. But could you go back to your first try at this with the bin store and kind of tell us what happened there? I know you mentioned that it was a good ways away. Do you see a correlation in distance from your original location to the next location being a real hurdle?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we made it doubly challenging on ourselves in the first go around back in 2004 when we added a second store 3 hours away. We put newer employees on our newest opportunity, which was that bin store. And unfortunately, we've got new demographic, new location, trying to figure out what kind of inventory would work well. And then we've got newer employees. And so there's just way too much new. There's no foundation. And so ultimately, 2 years later, we're going, oh, wow, something's starting to go awry. And of course, we all know what happened in 2008. And so we ended up shutting that store down in the downturn.
So how long was that store open, Eric?
The store was open about 2.5 years.
When did you notice, how long did it take you to figure out that it wasn't right? I mean, was it a feeling like the second month in, or how did you know when something wasn't right?
Well, I think looking at the numbers was our biggest, telltale that things were not going well. And one of the great lessons of that adventure was that we have to go in and look at a market before we even step foot thinking about that being a potential location. So in other words, I'm doing business in Portland, Oregon. I've got millions of people here. I can do business because inevitably there are people always every day ready to buy a car. We went into Bend, Oregon, which is a very small town. And so you have a demographic now that we've been there, we know, but we have a demographic that either has the money to buy a new vehicle, and Bend was well represented with both a Mercedes dealer, a BMW dealer, a Porsche dealer. Or you have the flip side, which is you have, working people who are really serving the other side of the demographic. And so there was not a lot of middle class, which is really what we serve. We serve in our business a group of people that want to drive a great car at a reduced cost. And so that demographic didn't exist in Bend at that time. So we did not do our due diligence, and therefore we failed.
That's so interesting about the demographics. And if you don't know what you're getting into, our model may not exist in that market. That's that's definitely something that we should all have on the forefront, but I don't even think about it. I just go, hey, well, my model's going to work, right?
Optimism, which is beautiful. I love optimism, but optimism needs to be supported by wisdom, by a thoughtful process of, is this going to work for me? So, based on that set of clear expectations and a roadmap to where I want my store to go, I was thinking when you shot me this topic about, why do I need a second store? Why? And the thought process, I came up with a few reasonings that might make sense to those people out there listening. One is I want an additional brand. I want to carry something that I don't particularly carry in the market I'm currently in. So that might be a reason. Mm-hmm. I might want to service a different location that I know has the potential to produce, units and be very serviceable from a location standpoint from where I am right now. So, for instance, our store in Salem right now is a 40-minute drive for me. Just perfect amount of time to listen to a great podcast, right? And get there, and I'm energized and I'm ready to go. So I love that. But it's not 3 hours away like Bend was. Number three, it offers additional positions in the company for some current employees that are ready to move up. And this was one of our large motivations as we opened up Salem. We had people that we knew had potential beyond where their positions were, but we didn't have anywhere to put them. And that's okay. You have to make a choice to go, I'm ready to launch these people and let them go, which is a fine choice too. For us, we said we want to retain these people. So what does that look like? So for us, it looked like, hey, let's look at what opening the second location would do. And so that offered additional positions where we could move people up. So that might be an idea for those people.
Really interesting thought, Eric. It makes me think, like, if you've got key employees and they're growing to the point where it's almost like this guy's either going to spin off and open his own store because he knows and can do the whole operation start to finish, or I can give him this place to grow and provide him with his own lot that's still under my name, but maybe he goes from being the sales manager to the GM or the VP or whatever it is. Is that kind of what you did there?
Absolutely. Yep, you bet. And so there was a lot of positions that opened up. And so it's exciting to watch now as Marshall begins to train people moving up in all of those positions to see these people just blossom, which is what's right now.
You didn't do that out of ego. You didn't do it because you wanted your name on a second store or a third store.
Yeah. No,
You did it because you had
it
key
had,
guys
it
that
had very little. Yeah,
grow them or lose them, you know?
yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I mean, the reality of it is, any man who has a good wife behind him, they're probably asking why or really.
Yeah.
So obviously Jenny was asking me that question, but this was for Marshall, for Kara and I. This was a move for employee growth. For me personally, I'm into real estate, and another option for a store can be a real estate move, where a store is supporting a piece of real estate that eventually will become, a piece of real estate for retirement income. So that might be a move. And then my last thought is I don't need a second store, and I'm crazy and a glutton for punishment. So that could very well be it too. So, but going back to the first point, the question is, as an owner, can I handle this kind of pressure?
Eric, that's I know how your training goes there and how Marshall's involved in that. Can you expand on the importance? I mean, you talked about it. The reason one of the reasons you expanded was because you had such great people. I think so many people don't think about that when they jump into a new store. They they just figure they can replicate it. Can you talk about the need to be maybe overstaffed and to develop those people with great training internally, or if you're training outside, to really the need to train like y'all do, and how vital that is to your business?
Training is absolutely an essential at Freeman Motor Company. We all tend to take the path of least resistance, and it's human nature. It's not wrong. It's just human nature. And so when we take the numbers each week and we look at phone ups, we listen to phone call interactions, we look at fresh ups, we look at test drives to desk, we look at all the metrics that we're tracking. It is very easy to see what numbers are lacking. And so rather than base our training on a feeling, we're looking at the numbers first, and then we're taking those numbers and going, we need to train on test drive to the desk. So we know we have a problem at the end of the test drive where we're asking for the sale, where we're asking them to pull up to the sold line. There's something going on there where we're not getting enough yes questions in. So we gear our training towards that. That's in sales, of course. F&I, same deal. Are we offering every item to every person every time? Service. Are we having comebacks? Or are we fixing the vehicle right the first time? So every department, we can look at the metrics and go, where this week are we failing, and how do we train on that? And I think based on how I grew up, we can sometimes look at training as, oh, you must think I'm failing. Training has nothing to do with failing, but every day just getting a little bit better and a little bit better until these trainings become muscle memory.
That's so interesting. You bring up that point of metrics. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, not a lot, but probably a majority of us, go on gut feeling, and I think that's so wrong. You can have a gut feeling, but you've got to make sure that the metrics say what they say. And one thing I've learned from you and Marshall, for sure. I mean, I've learned many things, but how many ups did you have? How are you tracking? What are you doing? But I've not thought past the point of making sure that I look at those numbers every week. I'm tracking them, right? But am I looking at those numbers to do my training? And I'm not. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's so so interesting. And that's the way I'm going to start basing my training, I guess.
Yeah. And what do you, I mean, why would you want to open a second location or a third location when all you're doing is you're just amplifying the current issue, right? Because you're going to take this flaw in your system or your training or your employees or your demos or whatever it is, and all you're going to do is duplicate that, and now you've got two problems, because you didn't have it right in your home store,
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Eric, when you moved, when you opened this store in Salem, I guess that was about a year ago now, or maybe not even quite a year ago, I guess. How did you move your employees? Did you decide, hey, these people are going to Salem? These are the people we've identified for general manager position. Can you kind of expand on how exactly you did that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think I want to back up for a second and talk about, can I afford even that second store? And then if I can afford it, how am I going to put the right employees in the right positions in this store? So some key lessons that we have learned and learned the hard way, unfortunately. I want to be really vulnerable here in the fact that we made some mistakes as we went out and built the Salem store. So can I afford a second store? So the question is, as I go out and procure this second location, what are the items that I need to think about that are potential costs in opening that second location? So as I look at that cost, will I be using savings, money that I've got set aside for a project like this, or am I going to dig into my working capital? And so we made the mistake of using a good chunk of working capital in thoughts that we were going to get some of it back at the end of a loan process. And so that didn't work out. I want to encourage you, use savings, don't use working capital and put yourself in a difficult position. So extra cash is always needed for building expenses and its contingencies. And I remember in the old days, Jeff, you could probably identify with this, and Luke, you too, having built places, we used to talk about a 10% contingency. I don't think that really is wise these days. A minimum of 20 and maybe even 25% contingency when we're talking about going out and renovating and building this second location. Next, the holding costs for inventory. One of the things that we really didn't think well through is, hey, we're going to buy inventory because we want to open up. And for us, it was January 7th. So at what point do you begin buying, shipping, reconning, and detailing inventory to begin advertising so you're open with inventory on day one? Well, that takes a lot of upfront cash to make all that happen for day one. So do I have the capital to make sure that inventory is set to go on day one? One of the biggest ones that I want to move into, Luke, is where you were asking about employees. So we grossly underestimated the amount of capital it would take to find, hire, and train employees to open this second store. Now, we had talked about some of our failures in Bend, and those failures were very fresh in our mind, even though that was a decade ago. How were we going to staff this store and be successful from the start? Well, we knew that we needed to hire employees who we could put into key positions in the Portland store and duplicate positions while training. So we had a minimum of 90 days training for a lot of these new employees because we wanted to make sure these employees that were coming into the Portland store, which is our flagship store, were going to succeed. I mean, the last thing you want to do is open a new store, put your best employees on that new opportunity, and then see your mothership sink. So we had to make sure that we had put time, energy into these people and making sure they were going to happen. I mean, shoot, the first 30, 60 days, we're dating, right? I mean, you don't know if this employee is really going to work out. And so we needed to make sure that we were set to go. So what does that mean? I've got a whole bunch of payroll that's going on with non-producers. These people were non-producers. They couldn't be producers. I mean, they were in training. So a lot of capital needs to be set aside, or I shouldn't say a lot, a very calculated amount of capital needs to be set aside for a minimum of 90 days training for staff that is going to go into that second store or additional store. And then last was we have to be real with ourselves in the fact that this store is probably not going to open and be profitable in the first month, maybe even the second month. I mean, we think about the average business that goes into business. How long does it take to be profitable? And so I think being realistic is we need to calculate 6 months to a year before we see a second store turning a consistent profit. So that's going to take capital from your original store while your second location gets up and going.
Hey, at least you get
these are.
At least you get a little tax break during that time, right?
Now that is a very positive twist, Luke. Yes, absolutely. You can definitely figure on a tax break upon opening that second store. Yeah.
Eric, I tell you, just the sheer cost of what you just described is huge. I mean, cash wise, let's use an easy number. If my overhead in my current store, let's just say it's $100,000 a month, and I'm wanting to open a second store, and for 90 days, how much of that, how much extra on top of my normal $100,000 do you believe it's going to cost me in real numbers?
Well, for 90 days.
Yeah. I mean, what's the number?
I don't know if I have that number off the top of my head. I think we are honestly still calculating kind of where we are. We're in July now, and we opened in January. And I'm going to guess that every store is going to be different. Our build out alone, not the buying of a property or that stuff, but just the build out of the property was $1 million in cash. And then the employees and training and inventory, we're looking at another $500,000 right there in cash.
So we're probably it was 50 to 75% of our normal, additional 50 to 75% of our normal overhead, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are definitely going to be things that you're going to save with a second location in departments that you may not need to duplicate, say titles, or, you may not even duplicate a shop because you think your current shop can produce the amount of inventory that you need for a second location. But therein lies another question that we need to identify. Who is going to buy the extra inventory? And as an owner, a lot of us owners buy our inventory, right? So the question is, can I handle the extra amount of time required to buy good inventory and setting up my second store for success? The second thing is, who's shipping this inventory? Who is going to go through this inventory? Can my shop handle the extra pressure? And sometimes they can for, a few weeks, but you start to put pressure on a shop that's used to producing X, and then all of a sudden they need to produce Y too. And so you start to see a breakdown, and you start to see, people that you thought could handle coming to you going, hey man, I'm working these extra hours, and I don't know if I can do this, or how much more are you paying me to handle this second store? And so be ready for some salary paycheck type questions. So, and those always get deferred to Marshall.
Hey, Eric, one thing I want to ask one quick question that I thought when you brought up about the 5 things that came to mind. Is there a scenario where you would recommend to another dealer that you would open a second location without a real estate play and without investing in the real estate? Does that make sense? Or
a lease?
Yeah, going rent somewhere. Does that make sense?
I'm sure it probably does. It wasn't our scenario, but I believe if somebody has a turnkey business with clear expectations where an owner is not the cog in that business, reproducing itself as we see many franchises doing, I don't see why it couldn't. The question is, how good of a lease can I procure? And if I can procure a great lease and a good location, why not? Okay. I mean, I just look at it long term. Why not pay a loan off while I'm doing business and have a piece of property at the end?
Yeah, that's a long-term play for sure. So, Eric, help us know, is a dealership, maybe give us some of those key indicators that we are ready to scale. What can I see in my day-to-day operation that says, yeah, man, I'm hitting these metrics, like my inventory turn is good. My shop is turning out X amount of units and has time to turn out X more. Or like you said, I'm an owner that's not really a crucial piece. I mean, maybe give us a help on what are some of those little bullet points or check boxes that we need to hit at our dealership that might even give us the idea, like, oh yeah, maybe I should look elsewhere.
Very good question.
Yeah. I think, first of all, identifying, like you were saying, Jeff, is my business running at a very efficient rate? My turn is good. My cash flow is good. And then, that going back to that crucial point, do I have people in the business that I could train up into positions above where they're working right now? If you are running at, efficiency and you don't have maybe extra employees that are ready to move up, who is going to fill those positions? So at that point, I would say you're probably not ready. And so carrying an additional, let's just say 10% of potential employees who can move up is a cost factor. And so maybe let's say that your store is running efficiently, turns good, money's good, and you do have 10+% of employees that you're going, man, I wish I had a place to put these people. They're so amazing. Then those are some key points, key indicators that I might be ready to open a store. But then, I always go back to the fact: do I have the energy? Do I want to, double my workload, double what I've got going on?
Yeah, and then I think, am I willing to travel the 30 minutes or an hour to this second location daily? You can't just hire someone that's local, stick them in there and show up once a week, right? Your guy has got to be either relocating to this town or committed to being there daily, right?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that people ask us, why were you drawn to Salem? Well, we had 11 employees commuting an hour up to Portland store each day. So it made sense to go towards Salem. And then, started to fall in place. We found the right property. We already had employees there. Marshall and Kara, lived in that vicinity. So it was very natural for us to pick that location.
Yeah. One thing I did when I was looking at, we have a neighboring county, and my CRM tells me that we get a lot of leads from that county, right? It's about 45 minutes away. One thing I did, in addition to that being kind of a telltale that like, hey, there's a need for this in this area because the amount of leads we're getting from that county. I also got on the DMV rolls and saw that the amount of cars being sold in the county are way lower than the amount of cars that are being bought by residents of the county. So there's actually a deficiency in that area where people are going outside of their location to find vehicles.
Did you see that, Eric?
Jeff, that's why they pay you the big money, Jeff. See, this guy's smart. Absolutely.
No, but that tells me that there's a need, that these people are going outside of their town to find cars. And so that's been an indicator for me. Obviously, I haven't pulled the trigger yet. And seriously, talking to you, Eric, I see that there's about 10, more check boxes that I need to get done before I should even look up there, But to your point of scalability, I always thought, well, it's super easy. I mean, I can get a lease. I've got the DMS. I've got my CRM. All my phones are internet-based. All I really need is I got to turn on the power, hang up a sign, and get internet, and I'm up and running. And that's just the super simplified, way too simple of a look at it. Like I didn't dig into the numbers. I haven't looked at my carrying costs. My shop can't do an extra 20 or 30 cars a month. It's just, we're not even getting done what we need to now. So it's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, one quick last question, Eric, that I think people may look at this, and this might be an indicator to some people, but I want to know if it was an indicator to you. If all of a sudden if I identify that let's say at my dealership, if I'm selling 50 cars a month, and I think that's the number. So did you have a number in mind that said, hey, if the Portland store is selling X amount of cars, that's when we're going to open a second location? Does that ever come to your mind? Is that something we should look at? Or is it all the other factors, not necessarily the amount of cars you're selling per month?
That's a great question, Luke. We did a 2-year projection for the new store, and we wanted to be really realistic about where we're going to start with and where we're going to move each month the bar. And we're 6 months of records in right now, and I'm going to just give credit to Marshall. That guy's a great projector of numbers. I mean, he's really spot on. But we grew from 17 to then over 20, and then we started creeping up, and then we had 1 month where we dropped back a little bit. So we identified, number of salesmen needed to be adjusted because we were looking at the metrics of how each one could produce, and then we began to hit 50 cars. And we're kind of right there right now figuring out, how do we bump 50 to 60? Looking at the numbers, we do have a goal hitting 85 cars, but we realize that that's probably going to be a year into the project. It's a year into opening the store. And building the clientele, building trust in the community, and creating a place that people know that's Freeman Motor Company. That's the place to go. And so it doesn't happen overnight. Does that answer your question?
I think my question is did you have a number in mind at the Portland store that, hey, once we consistently hit this number, I should open another store? Should that even be an indicator, or is it the processes that lead to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. It's interesting. Years ago when we opened up the Portland store and moved into that store, so we closed another location down and moved into that new store when we built it. Marshall said this store will produce 75 cars. I think that's just what it'll produce. The store can hold 108 cars indoors, and we felt like 75-ish was what it was going to produce. Now, we trend right somewhere in the 82, 83 car per month deal. But at that point, when we were hitting those numbers of efficiency, that was a factor going, okay, we're hitting our numbers here. In order to get over that hump, we're going to have to add a second location. We couldn't figure out how to get that store over 100 with the amount of room. We're in the city. We're very cramped for room. So there just was no way to even expand the inventory at that particular store. So going to an alternative location, that did play a factor once we were consistently hitting those numbers.
Hey, so have you seen any drop in Portland sales now that the Salem store is open?
Great question. Wish you didn't ask it, but yeah. So we moved our beloved manager, Aaron, to the Salem store. He was very consistent. He managed our sales guys in a way that was just smart. I mean, that's when we think of Aaron, we think of smart. And so we promoted a saleswoman who we love and into a management position. But anytime you promote, it takes time to build a manager. We did look outside of our company to hire a manager, and came to the conclusion that our best resources were within. So when we promoted Ashley, we were quick to remember that there's a lot to learn in being a successful sales manager, and we needed to be patient. Well, herein lies the issue, though, Luke. When you open a new store, naturally you're going to be drawn to that new store. You're going to be drawn to the newness and what's going on down there. And it's very easy to rationalize why you need to be there rather than at your, original store. And so we began to go, oh, whoa, we need to make sure we're spending adequate time with Ashley, our new sales manager. And so our numbers did drop. And was that Ashley's fault? Absolutely not. That was our lack of attention to making sure we were providing the tools for her to be successful. So when we got back in and noticed the numbers, we noticed those metrics and go, oh, stop, guys, stop, owners. We need to go back in there and make sure we're giving her the attention she needs. The numbers went right back up. So I guess the note is as we begin to open a new store, planning out our weeks where we're getting adequate attention to our supervisors and the people that are managing our stores is really crucial.
That's so great. I mean, your knowledge is and your preparation for these new stores is incredible, Eric, and we appreciate your time. Jeff, do you got anything else for Eric today?
No, I think that's so informative. I think everyone's going to learn a ton. I hope you guys were taking notes. I mean, Eric, you could write a book on this. That was just so informative. Things we don't think about, You get big eyes, and like you said, we're kind of these entrepreneurs that think we can just touch anything and turn it to gold. And I think that's probably when you talk to experienced dealers who have gone into multiple locations, I would say 80% of them regret opening a second store or quickly shut their second store because they didn't do the prep. And I think those that do the prep and have a game plan probably love their second and third locations.
I tell you, this is for everybody out there. If you're listening to this, you're going to probably need to listen to it twice, because what Eric just dropped on all of us when it comes to, if you ever think about opening a second store, I dare say you not do anything that he said you should do, because if you don't, you're going to probably have issues.
Well, doing our homework ahead of time, can save a lot of heartache, not only for you as an owner, but for employees who, if we don't do our homework, we're putting them in very vulnerable positions, and really not just them, but their families. And so
Sure.
it's as business owners, we need to take a step up to the plate and make sure we're prepping and building a foundation for their success.
And guys, if y'all don't know Eric like I know, but what he just said is so genuine. That guy cares about people so much, and he cares about cares about this industry, cares about his employees, and cares about other dealers. Eric, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you, Jeff and Luke. This was really fun.
All right, buddy.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Take care. Everyone, appreciate you listening to the podcast. Be sure to rewind and listen to this again, and listen to all of our other podcasts that we got on here. We appreciate your being a part of this, and be sure you subscribe and share this with your friends.